Hi, my name is Allison Zamuda, and I'm pleased to present a slide deck to provide an overview of the three interrelated elements of learning: acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. To create independent learners by design, learners that have the sophistication and the skill set to tackle unfamiliar, messy problems, challenges, and questions. After a quick conversation on what each of these elements entail, we will first evaluate existing assignments to identify questions and problems as acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. And then we have the opportunity to create, revise, or confirm a balanced learning plan according to those goals. Acquisition, meaning making, and transfer are at the heart of each of the three stages of backward design. In stage 1, we identify and articulate the transfer goals. Transfer. Making meaning is articulated through the design of understandings and essential questions. And finally, acquisition is designed by articulating the knowledge and skills. In stage 2, we design summative assessments that measure what matters. Specifically, the design of the performance tasks measure transfer and meaning making, and other evidence measures an efficient retrieval and demonstration of acquisition. But we're going to be spending our time and attention in this session on stage 3, the learning plan, the activities we design, the problems we create, the questions we pose to the students, so that we can make sure that we're providing regular, if not daily, experiences for students to engage in acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. A learner needs experience with all three of these elements. We want students that can recall procedures, facts, and vocabulary, but we also want them to be able to apply that knowledge to novel and complex situations with increasing confidence and independence that they can figure it out. Take a look at this image. What's the goal of a student driver, both for the driver herself and the passenger nervously looking at her performance? The goal for the novice driver is to learn to be responsible and focus on traveling in a safe manner by abiding the laws and anticipating the moves of other drivers, even and especially when conditions are not ideal. By focusing on the broader goal, it helps the student and the teacher give us a reason why we're practicing a given technique or reflecting on a given performance. Transfer is a learner's ability to apply prior learning to a novel and increasingly new and unfamiliar looking task, or an increasingly challenging context and situation. It is their ability to judge, act, self-assess, and self-adjust through that experience. Meaning making is a learner's capacity to make sense of seemingly isolated experiences, data, or facts. It's their ability to identify the gist, point of view, purpose, or significance, and then draw appropriate but not obvious inferences. 2 quick questions. What is the capital of the state of Virginia? What's 7 times 3? If you answered Richmond and 21 pretty immediately, you understand the point of acquisition. Acquisition is the capacity to efficiently and accurately recall information, rules, techniques, or procedures. We want our learners to do this fluently so that they can spend their time and attention on complex problems and challenges that require meaning making and transfer. Acquisition is a valuable and important goal and worth spending time and attention on in classrooms across all grade levels and subject areas. But conceptual understanding and transfer are equally vital and worth spending time on. As we begin thinking about a learning plan for a given period of time, let's start with acquisition. And I'm sure this is something that many of you are pretty strong in designing and delivering. The goal of acquisition on the slide is pretty straightforward: to have kids learn vital facts and skills so that they become automatic. And we have a clear role for both teacher and student. The teacher's role is to directly instruct. We do that through lecture, presentations, graphic organizers, modeling, and guided practice and feedback. And the learner's role is one not only of listening, being attentive to what's being said, but also doing lots of practice and rehearsal so that they're going after fluency on a regular basis. Take a quick read of the sample learning activities. If you have Bloom's taxonomy running through your head, mostly it's level 1, remembering. Action verbs like apprehend, recall, select, state, identify. Those are the key verbs that we can consider through acquisition. The goal of meaning making is to have students engage in active intellectual work to make sense of the content. Meaning is not so much taught and learned as it is challenged and constructed. We have to make meaning, we can't give it away. So the teacher's role is to present probing questions and intellectual tasks that resist an easy answer and demand thought. And as teachers, we model strategies for building, testing, and explaining and supporting meanings. And we want to continue to model and acknowledge the value of persistence. Levels of Bloom's taxonomy here are understand, apply, analyze, and evaluate. Take a look at these learning activities for meaning making. Key verbs here might be compare, critique, defend, synthesize, interpret, and support. All again require active sense making on the learner's part. The goal of transfer is to have the students effectively apply and adapt prior learning to novel and complex situations. So the teacher's role here, and again, it's something that teachers are generally not accustomed to doing, is observing student performance in real time and then functioning like a coach, giving students prompts to reflect on what worked and didn't work. We're trying to gradually release the experience so that the learners have an opportunity to be more and more autonomous. So it's important that we have clear performance goals with models, but the students really are in the driver's seat. So they're applying and adapting learning to the particular problem. And again, they are being coached in their performance as opposed to the teacher taking the lead. Bloom's taxonomy here is the student's capacity to create and evaluate. Take a look at these sample learning activities for transfer. As you can see, the students are presented with something novel, something that they haven't seen before, something that requires a level of analysis, an opportunity to rewind and play back, an opportunity to observe and make sense of what's in front of them. So action verbs for transfer activities are things like apply, create, design, innovate, solve, troubleshoot. So the slide in front of you is a summary of what we just reviewed. Acquisition, meaning making, and transfer, again, are three important and interrelated goals. In a few moments, you're going to see several slides that ask you to identify what's acquisition, what's meaning making, and what's transfer. So again, just quickly summarize what acquisition, meaning making, and transfer is in your own words with the partners next to you. Let's look at a reading example first. Your job with the partners next to you, whether you're sitting at your table or you have neighbors sitting next to you, is to look at this one at a time. And you're going to identify acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. Again, keep in mind that we want you to focus on one primary element, although many of these could be coded as more than one. So students memorize words from a vocabulary list for those words. Take a moment and discuss. And then as you continue to read down the rest of the 5 bullets, have a conversation and identify what is the primary focus of that activity for each bullet. Okay, here comes the right answers. How'd you do? Again, if you found that you coded something different, have a conversation with the folks sitting next to you as to why. Let's now take a look at a math example. Again, your job with the partner sitting around you is to identify acquisition, meaning making, or transfer. And again, pay attention to the verbs at play and then focus on the context of the rest of the statement. Let's take a few moments for you to identify one of these bullets at a time. How'd you do? So as you're continuing to look at the answer key, hopefully by the second time around, you should start to have the acquisitions pop out at you right away. Meaning making and transfer, again, may take a little bit more practice to identify. And again, keep in mind that some could be double-coded. A good example of that would be the second to the last one. Students examine various real-world relationships and determine which ones are linear. Again, the focus on real-world relationships and applying it to that may make you have tagged it as transfer. So again, I don't want you to worry too much about that, but at the same time, hopefully you're starting to see the real difference between acquisition and meaning making and transfer. So it's incredibly important that your students understand the power of the design that you're doing right now. And you do that by highlighting transfer, meaning making, and acquisition goals. So the goals that you put on the board on a daily basis, again, try to make sure that they are a balance of acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. But some folks have also found real help in taking the teacher role and the student role in the previous slides that we went through and actually posting that as well. What's my job as a teacher when I'm engaged in meaning making, and what's your job as a student? So that the students have cues on what they're supposed to do and what is required based on the problem or the challenge in front of them. The second piece, in terms of having learners practice judgment, we want to make sure that students see that we're expecting something very different from them to be using a recipe or a plug-in formula. That's actually a scaffold or a crutch. And we want them to be able to make fluid decision making. Transfer is really about strategically using skills, conditional knowledge. You're very powerful as teachers as you think aloud here, modeling how you approach it. And again, make sure that you're giving students practice and feedback on how they're retrieving knowledge, how they're making adjustments along the way. And finally, give them unfamiliar prompts, items, and problems. And ask students to generalize. What are they learning from the problems in front of them? What are they learning from the questions or the patterns that they're asked to investigate? So now we're ready to take a look at the lesson you brought with you today. Keep in mind that you're coding for acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. And try not to make a force fit. It is perfectly natural, right, especially from the very beginning, to see a lot of acquisition activities and relatively few meaning making and transfer. So the idea here is that you want to code for accuracy. And if you're torn between what to code it as, ask a partner around you to help out. We're about at the end of our presentation, and I want to talk to you about some follow-up ideas. The original goal that we started with is to create more independent learners that can make sense of information and apply their knowledge to messy and complex situations. So how do we design daily activities that are aligned with that vision? As you came to realize when you were evaluating your own lesson plans, you begin to see patterns. So what did you notice? And again, having conversations, whether it's with your grade level peers or folks in your department, it really helps when you're engaging with others. Do you see a pattern in your practice? Do you find that you're more likely to do acquisition in the beginning of the lesson or the unit to get them ready for meaning making and transfer? I want to tell you that there is not a ladder that students need to climb. It may be more compelling to introduce them to a problem and then use just-in-time teaching for the acquisition element that students need to make sense of that problem. The other idea that I have for you is action. So when you're developing, revising, or confirming activities, I want to make it clear that when we're thinking about that balance, balance does not mean an equal number. So when you're thinking about this, a robust question or prompt that may be coded as meaning making or transfer could be paired with 3 or 4 acquisition activities. So again, we want to make sure that students have a regular opportunity, if not a daily opportunity, in all 3 of those elements. And finally, it helps when students understand what your role and what their role is when you're thinking about acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. My name is Allison Zamuda and hope this was helpful. And again, looking forward to meeting each and every one of you as we continue to do work on the Understanding by Design process. Thanks so much.